Hey everybody, welcome. This is Bad at Keeping Secrets, and I have someone really exciting for you today. His name's Dan Pink. I have been a fan of his ever since before going to grad school. I think I read A Whole New Mind or A Whole New Brain in 2005. When did that
Whole
come
New
out?
Mind, 2005.
And then Drive, and then To Sell is Human, and then let's see, when am I forgetting? And now The Power of Regret, which came out in February. So thank you so much, Dan, for taking time to talk to me about regrets. And I think I want to start off this with a little bit about you. If you could talk about kind of something I'm endlessly fascinated by is like how people get interested in what they're interested in. And the caveat this right now is that what were you exposed to as a youth, or what were you sort of taught or understood about writing that kind of maybe paved the way for you to do what you do?
I don't know if there was anything that I was taught or understood about writing. I think that the transformative thing, probably a major factor in my growing up and becoming a writer, was that I grew up in central Ohio. And as you're, no one would possibly know, Ohio as a state and central Ohio as a region has among the best public library system on the planet. Ohio has among the best and best financed libraries in America because of the way that they are the way that they are financed. They're financed a different way from a typical way that public libraries are financed, and it's been the way for for a very long time. So I grew up very living within walking distance of an excellent public library and within bus ride distance of a ginormous downtown library. And I spent a lot of time in libraries as a kid just because it was fun. I wasn't trying to become a writer, but I think that that exposure to books and that exposure to the written word is a major factor in my becoming a writer today.
What did your parents do?
My father was kind of he worked for a scientific nonprofit and sort of like a low level job there. And my mother was a school teacher for a few years.
I always think I think my theory at the moment is that it's really unavoidable that we do something sort of follow in our parents' footsteps in some ways. And I wonder if you feel
I
like,
don't,
no?
no, I don't, well, I mean, I think there's some truth to that just because I mean, in my case, that wasn't it. I didn't, I don't think I followed in my footsteps at all. I think sometimes you see people people grow up in households that are, where people are pursuing certain kinds of professions, and because they're exposed to that profession, they know about it and are interested in it. So, accountants beget accountants, and doctors beget doctors. But my parents were not writers. I went to law school. My parents were not lawyers.
Oh, I
Um,
don't know why I didn't know that you went to law school. Did you
yeah,
not
I
like being
did.
a lawyer?
Did I what?
Did you not like being a lawyer?
I never practiced law. I just went to law school. I
Oh,
realized in law school that it was a colossal mistake, but I was too chicken to get out. So I ended up leaving law school and working in politics. I literally never practiced law a day in my life. Never clerked for a judge. Never did anything like that.
so I think that this could be a natural segue into regrets. And kind of thinking about the past, I think I want to start, if it's possible with you, if we could talk a little bit about, again, what no regrets, where we are at this moment, what the sort of values of no regrets are, and what sort of the underpinning desires that are in the statement, no regrets.
Well, I mean, I think that when people say they have no regrets, I think what they're doing is that they're following a script that isn't quite the right script to follow for a good life. That in some ways we have been sold a bill of goods. We've been told that we should be positive all the time and never be negative. That we should always look forward and never look backward. And there is 50, 60 years of research in cognitive science, social psychology, in developmental psychology, and neuroscience, showing that's a bad idea. That's a bad idea. What the research tells us is that everybody has regrets. It is one of the most common emotions that human beings have. It is everywhere. It is ubiquitous in the human experience. The only people without regrets are people who, like little kids, or people with certain kinds of, brain problems. But the other dirty little secret here is that not only does regret make us human, but regret done right can make us better. And this is I think the big surprise here, that if we treat our regrets properly, we can use them for a whole array of benefits. It can help us become better negotiators, better problem solvers, better strategists, better thinkers, find more meaning in life. The challenge is that no one ever teaches us how to do that. So we get caught. So we either ignore our regrets, go blah, I regret, blah 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 blah, drown it out, or we get so captured by it we wallow in it and ruminate in it. What we need to do is actually confront our regrets. And if we do that systematically, it has an array of benefits.
Can we pause for a brief moment on a term that you used
Yeah.
just a moment ago? Good life. Can you kind of break down what you mean when you use the term good life and what that is?
Well, I mean, I think that that's a really interesting question. I don't think there's a singular definition of it.
Oh,
I think what
I
is,
wasn't implying
yeah,
that.
no, 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 but I think it's a good question. I think it's something for all of us to ponder. What constitutes a life well lived? And I think that regret gives us some clues about that. Because if you look at what people regret, and I've examined the regrets of 21,000 people from 109 countries. It turns out that with remarkable consistency and universality, people seem to regret the same four things. And these four regrets are a reverse image of, I think, they're a reverse image of the good life. That when people tell you what they regret the most, they're telling you what they value the most. And when we look at people's regrets, it gives us a picture of what people want out of life. And I think what people want out of life, and we can back into this, is I think what people want out of life is some stability. So they don't want to feel precarious. They don't want to have a wobbly platform. I think people want the opportunity to learn and grow and do something in the vanishingly short time they're on this planet. I think most of us, nearly all of us, want to be good, want to be moral, want to do the right thing. And I think we're also, of course, looking for love and connection and belonging. And I think that that constellation of things constitutes a life well lived.
I love the way you said that, those constellation of things. Anything referencing the stars always gets me, the poetics of it. But can you talk about, I think that this is somewhat of a tangent, but also I think potentially interesting. I think right now it's sort of, I feel like embarrassed to say that I think humans are good and want to do good. Because I think, or like assuming once you know someone's story, you would love them or be able to love them. And I was just curious if you consider that sort of a risque thing to say.
I think it's a counterintuitive thing to say, but I think that it's right. I think that human beings are moral animals. I think that most of us, in my experience in looking at these regrets and just in general, is that that most of us want to be good, and most of us try to be good, and most of us feel crappy when we're not good. I mean, it's, I have 100 plus regrets in my database from around the world of people who regret bullying kids when they were younger. And these are regrets that have lingered for 30, 40 years in some cases. So I think that now, I don't think that everybody wants to be good or is good, but I think that most of us, when I say most of us, I mean like 98%. The 2% really cause a lot of problems and really screw things up. But I think that most of us, I think most human beings are moral animals. The other thing about this is that a lot of times we don't extrapolate enough from our own experience, just in general. And so we think that somehow our experience on the planet is wildly unique and different from everybody else's. So, I mean, I thought that when I thought about my own regrets, and then I realized that every regret that I had, I can find in that database, that I'm totally not that special. But I think that if you ask people, do you generally try to do the right thing? They will say, yes, I try to do the right thing. If you ask people, I think most people will say that. If you say, do you generally do the right thing? Yes, I generally do the right thing. Do you feel bad when on those rare moments when you don't do the right thing? Yes, I do. But somehow they think that no one else is like that. When in fact, I think most of us are like that. I mean, not everybody, but I think that most of us are like that. And so I think that human beings are moral animals. Not all the time, and not everybody, but I think that we are. I
Uh,
mean, yeah.
I mean, I agree. I think contextually, if I was that person in that situation, in having the genetic information that they or won the genetic lottery that they did, would probably make the same, or I would have to make the same decision. But I want to talk a little bit about, so let's pretend you are that bully and you are reflecting back on sort of the feelings that you had of
Yeah.
past mishaps. What do you do with that information once you've identified it?
Okay, that's a great question. So when we think about, let's take something like bullying. All right, so we'll talk about it at a higher level and at a specific level. So if you are think about all the decisions and think about all the actions and decisions that you've undertaken yesterday. All right, a lot of them, and most of them you don't even remember. All right, and
Okay,
but
all
so
of them.
since yeah, I mean, most of them you don't, most decisions and actions you barely even remember. That's yesterday. Now think about a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, 10 years ago. So most of the stuff like you don't remember, you don't think about, they don't bother you or delight you or anything like that. But if you have something from 20 years ago or 30 years ago that's sticking with you and making you feel bad, that tells you something. That is giving you a very important signal. You can't put your fingers in your ears and try to drown out that signal. That is a very important thing to listen to. And I think what it's telling you is two things. One, it's telling you what you value. This is what we were talking about before. If you're bothered by this from 30 years ago, it's saying to you, hey, you value kindness. You value treating people well. You value treating people with respect and dignity and fairness. Right? So it's
And
clarifying what you
forward.
value. Yeah, and it's instructing you how to do better in the future. And so, how do you do better in the future? Well, to me, it's like what you need to do in the face of these. So if you bullied somebody in the past or have any kind of regret, the natural tendency is to excoriate yourself, to talk to yourself in ways that are brutal and vicious. Our self-talk is absurdly vicious and cruel. Don't do that. Instead, treat yourself with kindness rather than contempt. Don't treat yourself better than anybody else, but there's no evidence that treating yourself worse than other people is effective. It's not. So treat yourself with kindness rather than contempt. Recognize that your mistakes are part of the human condition, and recognize that it's a moment in your life, not the full measure of your life. That's the first step. The second step is out. That's inward. The second step is outward. Talk about your regret, disclose your regret. It's a form of unburdening. Convert that kind of blobby negative feeling into concrete words. That'll help you make sense of it. And then finally, you have to draw a lesson from it. And I think the lesson in the case of bullying is treat people with respect. And so you have to commit yourself to say, you know what, I am going to treat people with respect. And if I see other people bullying others, I'm going to stand up and speak up about it. And now that doesn't extinguish that regret, but it transforms it into something. It allows you to go forward and do better by yourself and by other people.
We rushed a little bit on self-compassion, and it's something that you talk about in the power of
Yeah.
regret. And I was wondering if you could kind of talk about what self-compassion looks like to you specifically, like in your daily life.
Well, again, I think there's a kind of triangulation that goes on. For me, so I was very taken by the research on self-compassion, um, and I'll talk from my own perspective. So I actually, until very recently, have been a very staunch believer in self-criticism. That when I talk to myself, when I think about myself, I am just brutal and relentless um, and exacting, and that is a path to high performance. And what the research tells us is probably not. Probably
Why?
not.
Sorry,
Well,
I'm
I, I,
familiar with
I
a
think
little
what
bit
the
of the
reason
research, but not.
I think that well, it depends on sort of the degree of laceration. If you say, if you make so if you say if you make a mistake and say, I always make that mistake, I'm a complete idiot, I'm a moron, why do I always do this? That's not useful and productive. If you say, wow, if you evaluate the act itself and say, wow, that was a stupid thing to do. What did I learn from it and what am I going to do about it? That's more productive. Now, so what we have here with self-compassion is in some ways a triangulation between lacerating self-criticism and self-esteem. There's a whole self-esteem movement out there that tells us that we should always feel good about ourselves, that we should try to pump ourselves up, and that's true a few times, but it's actually not that useful either. What we want to do is, as I said, treat ourselves with kindness rather than contempt. Um, um, uh, Again, go back to this idea that we were talking about before, that while the experience is unique to us, it's not unique in humanity. It's part of the human experience to make mistakes. It's part of the human experience to to have regrets and screw ups and mishaps. And the other thing is that the other mistake that we make is that when we do bad things, we tend to make these kinds of universal attributions about ourselves. So if I do something stupid, it's like, oh, I'm an idiot. All right. If I do something smart, you don't say, most people don't. So I'm a genius. You shouldn't say that either. You should evaluate the act rather than the totality of the person. And I think that what self compassion teaches us, as I mentioned before, more than anything else, is to treat yourself with the same kindness you would treat other people. If you have people in your life who you care about, you very rarely say to them, if they make a mistake, you're a fucking idiot. What is wrong with you? You very rarely say that, but we routinely say that to ourselves. And it's not that complicated. It's like that old joke where a guy goes to the doctor and he says, "Doctor, it hurts when I do this." And the doctor says, "Don't do that." That's the solution. Don't do that. Don't treat yourself. I think we have this notion that somehow we're going to perform better if we treat ourselves significantly more harshly and worse than other people. There is no evidence of that. There's no evidence that we should treat ourselves better than other people. What we should do is treat ourselves with basic kindness and actually use these negative feelings, whether it's regret or anything else, to make sense of our lives and extract lessons that we can apply to the future.
I think in the book, you talk a bit about silver linings, and I think something that I've been ruminating on for a while now is this idea of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I'm really indifferent about silver linings at the moment, or the practice of finding them, and also the sort of intersections between that and positive psychology. And I was wondering if you could kind of talk about how silver linings fits into, or if you've researched that, and if you have any opinions on the statement, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Well, the okay, so let's talk. Those are two different kinds of questions, but let's talk about silver linings. What the regret hinges on what's called counterfactual thinking. That is, our brains are incredible in that we can conjure events that run counter to the actual facts. There are two kinds of counterfactual thinking. There is what's called an upward counterfactual, where you imagine how things could have been better. If only I had married Fred, I would be living in a big house and have three great kids and living a beautiful life. All right. That's an upward counterfactual. That makes us feel worse. But there's also a downward counterfactual. All right. Downward counterfactual is you can imagine how things could have been worse. All right. So you say, I shouldn't have married Joe, but at least I have these two great kids. All right, you find the silver lining. Now, at least these downward counterfactuals make us feel better. They don't necessarily help us do better, but they make us feel better, and sometimes that's okay. And so these downward counterfactuals are finding a silver lining is a way to reduce some of the sting of regret or mistakes. And it's perfectly acceptable if reducing that sting makes it easier for you to make sense of the regret and to draw lessons from it.
And move on, or maybe move through.
Right. Now, on your other thing, whatever doesn't kill us makes us stronger. I mean, I think there's some truth to that. I think one of the things that we sometimes underestimate is human resilience. There's a whole line of research in medicine on post-traumatic stress, which is obviously a serious, horrible thing for people who endure it. I think what's less well known is that there's a phenomenon called post-traumatic growth, where people who experience difficulty and trauma actually emerge on the other side of it better, stronger, more equipped to deal with it, next time. And so, I think that what we should end up doing is actually assuming that most people can be resilient most of the time. And having those expectations is, I think, really helpful in helping people learn and grow and expand as people. There are going to be some times when people cannot cope, and I think and have a medical problem, and there we need to treat people medically and with compassion. But I think that there is a belief out there that almost the opposite belief, that whatever doesn't kill you makes you weaker, and I think that's a dangerous belief.
Oh, really? I don't know.
Yeah, well,
I'm kind of torn
this
about it.
is
I haven't thought about what doesn't kill you makes you weaker, but I feel like that seems more in alignment of my understanding of uh, difficult moments, if that makes sense. Like,
I but I think again, I don't think it's clear cut, but I think in general that if we equip people to make sense of their difficult moments, they can emerge on the other side of it stronger and better. I don't think that's true in all cases. And I think there are people who have the sort of trauma that truly leads to lasting deep suffering that needs serious treatment. So it's complicated, but I think starting with the premise that people are resilient, starting with the premise that people can learn and grow from their experiences, both positive and negative, is I think the most helpful starting premise. I also think it's the most accurate starting premise.
I definitely agree with you there. Can you talk a little bit about how potentially we can anticipate regret and how that might help us sort of understand and make actions in alignment with what are good for us or what we feel like we'd ultimately want?
Sure. I mean, so anticipating our regrets and trying to reduce them is generally a pretty good idea. It's not perfect though, because what we have to do is we have to anticipate the right regrets and minimize those. And
Hard.
um, it's very hard, but we have evidence of this. As I said, I've collected regrets from people all over the world, and people seem to have the same four regrets. They regret not building a stable foundation for themselves or for their families. They regret not taking a chance to learn and grow and live. They regret not doing the right thing. They regret not reaching out and building connection and belonging and affinity with other people. And so I think that you want to reduce those regrets going forward. But I think a lot of things, like if you say, "Oh man, well, I need to buy a new car. Should I buy a blue car or a gray car? Whoa, which will I regret most?" I think that's a complete waste of time, because the you of 10 years from now is not going to care one way or the other. And a heuristic that you can use is you can actually say, if I were to place a phone call to myself 10 years from now, if I were to talk to the me of 2032, what would that person tell me to do? And that person would say, "I don't care what color car you buy. I don't care what you have for dinner tonight. But if you make a decision today in 2022 that destabilizes your foundation in 2032, I'm going to be upset. If you say, "Oh my God, I was too wimpy to learn and grow and try stuff, take a sensible risk," in 10 years from now, the you of 2032 is not going to be happy. We've talked a lot about morality. If you do something that violates your moral code, the you of 2032 is going to have a few words with you. If you do not build love and connection with other people, the you of 2032 is going to say, "What are you doing leaving me so alone and adrift here?" So I think that what we want to do is we want to work very hard to reduce those four kinds of regrets. And actually, on a lot of the decisions that we make, and we make, as I said, as we were talking before, hundreds of decisions, each week, if not thousands, just do the best you can and forget about it.
Oh, uh, what a relief. Um,
Yeah,
to think about it that way.
yeah.
I was wondering if you
I
could.
don't think we need. I don't think we need to. We don't need to. I mean, there's a lot of research on this. We don't need to maximize every. We don't need to maximize every decision. We don't need to maximize every decision that we make. On some of them, on many decisions we make, good enough is good enough. What we should be doing is maximizing the right decisions. That to me, coming back to the term that you love so much, that to me is the path to the good life. Is figuring out where do I what's called satisficing. Where do I decide that it's good enough, and where do I maximize? And I think there's a very small universe of things that where we want to maximize. I think we want to maximize stability, growth, morality, and love.
Uh, so you are going so fast. Instability. Let's talk about, because we're in this moment of instability and how I didn't really think about how this book functions as a stabilizing force. Can you talk a little bit about maybe thinking about regret in terms of a sort of grounding or looking at um, kind of where we're situated in a more sort of wanting to be certain. I don't know if you feel like you want to be certain at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, when
You're
the
totally off.
stability that I'm talking, the stability that I'm talking about comes from people who have regrets that I call foundation regrets, where if only I'd done the work. These are people who regret not saving money, spending too much, saving too little, not working hard enough in school, not taking care of their health. Small decisions that add up to bad consequences that are very, very hard to undo. And so, and I think what this tells us is that what we want out of life is some degree of stability. And when the external world is so unstable, I think that can be very alarming. And I think that's one reason we have this. I mean, if you look at every piece of polling data, people have a sense that okay, it's all everything's going awry. We're going in the wrong direction. Um, things are messed up. So I think the external world and your internal choices, work together. But I do think that we all feel a sense of instability right now. 2 years plus, almost 2.5 years. Good God,
Okay, so I have
into the pandemic. Yeah.
two last selfish questions. You have kids, right?
Yes.
What do you want, or what do you say? Can you give any sort of like, how do you inspire your kids to keep going, or what would you like? What would that sort of life well lived or good life? How do you translate that through parenting?
I'm not in the mode of inspiring my kids. I just am the mode of like treating my kids with love and helping them, find their own way. For me, with my kids, it's like I want them to make a contribution to the world. I don't, not that I want them to do that. I want them to feel that they want to make a contribution to the world. To spend this incredibly short amount of time they have on the planet contributing something, learning and growing and advancing and building relationships of love on their own, but also making a contribution to the world, whatever that contribution is. I'm not saying I want them all to solve the climate crisis or feed the hungry. I'm saying make the contribution however you see it. And I think that that's part of what a good life is actually, are you contributing to the world in whatever way feels like a contribution to you?
That sort of touches on Drive, the science. Can you tell me I can't remember the subtitle of Drive, the science behind.
The surprising truth about what motivates us.
Yes. Um, it kind of thinking about motivation and a whole. And thank you for answering that. I think as a parent at this time, it's sort of grappling like how do you want them to have a good life and you want them. I just there's no sort of path. It feels very uncertain. Last question: where do you find hope to keep going? And I know that's like very cliche in a lot of ways, but I really like to end on. Do you read David Burns' Reasons to Be Cheerful?
I didn't read it. No, I know of it. Yeah,
But
and I'm a David Byrne fan too. So that's so here's the thing. I think that there are huge numbers of hidden heroes out there, everywhere. I think there are people who are running daycare centers. There are people who are teaching school. There are people who are providing medical care to people who wouldn't otherwise get it. There are people who are working their butts off on multiple shifts to provide a good life for their family. I just think that what we have to do is open up. What gives me hope is if I go through my life not blinkered, not cynical, but awake to what's going on out there and keep my eyes open for these hidden heroes. That gives me hope.
that was a really, I mean, that's a really unexpected answer. And I think so. Kind of, if I was going to expand upon that, it means noticing the power of noticing
Yeah, yeah,
makes
absolutely,
makes you feel
absolutely,
hopeful.
absolutely. Well, it's not the power of noticing; it's what I notice.
Yeah.
Because I think if you notice, what you'll see is that there's a lot of good. As messed up as things are, there's still a lot of goodness out there, and there's still a lot of people who are fighting the good fight and doing the right thing. And the fact that there are so many of those, especially in this incredibly coarse and culture and the sea of cynicism that we're in, the fact that there are so many of those is what gives me hope.
Well, let's end there. Thank you so much, Dan, for doing this, for talking about the power of regret with me. Sorry, I'm holding up the book again. Everybody knows I have it. I'll put a link to get it in the newsletter. But thank you so much, and thank you for writing and exploring regret. It definitely, I feel like, opened me up to a lot of values that I didn't really understand that I had, and I hope to use them moving forward.
Fantastic. That's great to hear. Thanks so much for having this conversation.
My pleasure. Take care.